It's been very violent to be Black and to grow up in a home, Guatemaltecos who are also hating of Blackness. And there was always this, my dad's, he's Black, and my mom was just like when my dad left us, like the whole family was like, yeah, because he's Black. Wow. Like there was already like this negative connotation and perception of like, yeah, you don't date Black men, and this is what happens when you have babies with a Black man. So it was like we felt like a disgrace, and so even my mom felt like she made a big mistake for falling in love with the Black man.
I can't help but these, 'cause they know they can never touch these. So baby, let me talk my shit, or I might just go another feed.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Stranger Fruit. My name is Constanza Eliana. I am so excited to be in the studio here in Los Angeles again. I'm so excited that y'all are here. I'm going to introduce our panelists for you today. We have Jose Richard Aviles. He is an artist and urban planner, born and raised in South Central LA, and the host of Fruta Fresca podcast and your favorite, Tia Desmadrosa.
A huevo.
Welcome. We also have Michelle Morales. She is a bilingual school psychologist and creative healing artist who utilizes movement as a tool for healing and self-empowerment. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. And we have Daisy Romero. She is an entrepreneur based out of San Diego and Tijuana, Mexico, and the founder of accessories brand El Cholos Kid. Welcome. Thank you. So, Anti-Blackness is a thing in Latinidad, whether people want to admit it or not, whether
I
they...
don't know what you're talking about. And actually, there's always like the one like white person who's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
What do you mean?
My family of 4 people is actually like really inclusive, and I like don't get it. I was like, okay.
Let me tell you about my tia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and again, like this whole idea of, I don't see color, I don't see race, I don't see anti-Blackness, that's not me. That is not just for white Americans. That is very much living in Latino culture. So I want to talk about that because I feel like I have talked a little bit on my platform about how I have been learning to dismantle anti-Blackness within myself and my, family and culture and friends. But I want to hear what it's like for you all, because again, we are all different skin tones. We all have a different relationship with anti-Blackness. So what does that look like for us? Maybe Daisy, we'll start with you.
The perpetrator. It's just like, I think it's...
She's kidding. She's kidding. For the trolls in the comments.
I'm like, they're going to cut that part right there and be like the TikTok.
That's how she
right
gets
there.
me. That's how she gets me. I'm like, No, I just think it's like people like to pretend. It's because anything you say, people take personally.
They do.
It's like, there's anti-Blackness in Mexico. I'm not. It's like we're talking about like things in general. I'm not going after you and your grandmama and like your mommy wasn't. I don't know your business, but generally, I walk through a market. Güerita, ay, o sea. Hay que mejorar la raza. Everyone. Hay que mejorar. Ay, pero y tu novio is like, that's all. If people say that that's not something they heard, you are either
you're a liar.
Deaf, you're lying. I don't know what's happening, but like, that's a real thing, and even amongst the cousins, you know what I mean? There's the light-skinned ones and there's the darker ones. No te me pongas en el sol porque te ves percudida. You know what I mean? It's like it's heinous, and it does affect. It affects the way people are treated. It affects. I mean, just look at the novelas. Who's the protagonista? The beautiful white skin, like
La Blanquita.
Who's the maid
with the straight hair? Always straight hair.
Straight hair, and the maid. You know, and we grew up, at least, you know, watching Mexican novelas. It was always like, there was always like the Afro-Mexicans were always, and I don't remember the name of the actor, but it was always like the you know, the worker, or like the very poor person. Like they never, it was never shown as, you know, somebody who was darker skinned in a lead.
Right, or successful.
Or successful. It was always like, oh, the poor person over there.
Or they're also like the brujo.
Yeah, see. That like,
that's the one. Yeah.
Or whatever.
You know who did a really good job portraying this? Roma. Do y'all remember the movie Roma? Oh my God, broke my freaking heart. But it was such a great depiction of the relationship that we have with caste in our culture, where los blanquitos son the successful ones. They're the ones with the big house, with the nanny, with the this, with the cars, with the everything. And then the workers, the babysitter, the nanny, the chef, the whatever, the school teachers, those are all the ones that are darker skinned. And that movie just did such a good job of portraying not only what it looks like, but what it feels like and the consequences that has for people in their real lives. Like, it's not just a thing that we talk about. It has real consequence.
And even, but even like the actress.
Yes.
Yalitza.
Yeah, Yalitza, when she went to the Oscars, Mexican media, ay, ¿cómo se viste así? Ay, parece India. Bro, what?
Exactly. And you're like, because...
it's like the first ones like bringing you down and like, and attacking. But if you say, yes, right, that's, you know.
Yeah.
No. You know,
pero yo no soy racista. No, I'm just saying.
Like, yeah. It's
pero nomás que se veía feíta.
No, es que no soy racista, pero es que está medio mal. Se ve medio mal.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real big. It's like huge.
I think my first experience in sort of understanding the politic of my skin and my melanin was maybe, I don't remember, but I was young. Girl, out of Costco. Not out of Costco. But I remember very much so, and I'm grateful for this person, but I remember, I think I was going to go get like a shirt or something. And I remember having a conversation with my mom and be like, no, not that one, because se va a ver mal porque estoy moreno. Like, I'm making this implication that certain colors were not good for me because of my skin tone. And then this older gentleman heard me and comes up to my mom and goes, do you mind if I tell them something? And my mom was like, no, go ahead. And then they looked at me and said, never say that again. Because you as a brown person, you have sazon in your skin. You have flavor. And I just remember that moment being so integral to being like, well, fuck, okay, cool. Let me unpack that, you know? And I was so young. And I think since that, I mean, the whole like, vas a poner prieto, or like in being, and you know what the funny thing is? Like, I feel like in my family, I'm seen as the darker one. But I'm like, girl, in a box of crayons, if we were to put ourselves like that, my sister be next to me, not like 3 colors down. So I'm like, what is the difference between my brown and your brown? Like, what? So I always feel like, and on top of that, Jota, salió queer también la más prieta.
Puro problema,
puro
you.
Problema, puro problema en la casa. And so I think it was one of those things of like, I caught up, I equate my queerness with my brownness, because so much of my queer identity, it's like, it's in me. It's a part of me. It's part of the design of who I am. And I think for the longest, I considered my skin tone and my melanin as something that was external to me. As something that I could change, something I could morph, either by not wearing sunblock or by wearing sunblock. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, nah, my brownness is like my queerness. They're a part of me. They're my design. And I think in this whole conversation, as well as we're trying to find back genealogy and where we come from and ancestors, you know,
which is so trendy right now.
Exactly. And I don't want to do 23andMe. I don't like, I'm a little bit of a like paranoid around like, don't be you know, like
I'm gonna catch all my family members who did crime.
I'm at a place right now where I feel I wrote a little poem about this, but I was like, it's like I lost you centuries ago, and I know that I will never find you in this lifetime, but at least I can say that I started in this one. And it's a thing of my
Qué poeta. Wow.
You have to tell me with verses, Nadia. Like, now I feel like, what am I doing here?
And just thinking of like, I feel like I'm reconciling with my ancestors. They're here. Like I cannot not get away from it. And I love that so much. And I feel like now I'm learning to really appreciate the way that the brownness of my skin glows when it's all sweaty in the sun. It's like, it's beautiful. And it's like, I'm a reflection of earth, bitch. Like, what's up? I know where I come from in the soil. Like, I don't know about you.
Yeah.
You know, so I feel like it's been a lot of that, but like similar to you were saying, Daisy, right? Like the whole, I don't know what was worse. I'm gonna keep it hella real. I don't know what was worse in my family growing up, if I brought another male partner or if I brought a black partner. Like, to
That's
be real.
real.
You know what I mean? Like,
In a lot of families, that's so real.
yeah, like would my mom, and maybe this is why I was called Malinche. So growing up, one of my nicknames was Malinche, and Malinche's super dope. Y'all should look her up. But you know, I was seen as a traitor to the desire of my people because most of my former partners had been white men. And so folks are like, you only desire whiteness, which I think there was some truth to that, to be real. And then we unpacked that. And now I think about it, and I think some of the stem of it would have been that, like, my mom may have not been okay with my queerness, but she may have tolerated if I brought a white partner, as opposed to I'm bringing a black woman. You see what I'm saying? And so it was this interesting, because the common denomination.
You're saying too much.
Just spilling all the secrets.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. But I think in that processing, right, of like, what is it now? And I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's still constant unpacking all the time. And I think about, okay, cool. For me now, especially as someone who's been doing like organizing for such a long time, like anti-racist work is no longer enough if we're not talking about like pro-Black liberation. And I know that I benefit from it because a lot of the shit that I was told about my brown skin, like I can understand anti-Blackness via colorism, right? Because the darker I got, the more proximity I had to Blackness. So the common denominator was that Blackness was not okay. And so I feel like now that I'm older, I'm like, no, anti-racism work is not enough, but pro-Black liberation is the work that needs to happen because I know that's where I benefit from too. And not that, like, you know, my end goal is like, I'm gonna get the benefit, so this is what I should do. But it's like, no, it's the atoning for that harm atones for so many other harms too. Yeah. And I just gotta find my place within my power and privilege to get closer to that. It's supporting Black organizers, Black artists. It's having the hard conversations. It's why I'm taking this class on racism and xenophobia in Spanish. Because now I have a language. Now I can understand the lie that is mestizaje and why my mom operates in the way that she does, and my other family members as well, and just Latinidad in general. So it's always about unlearning and striving to be better, for sure, because I mean, like, we're gonna make mistakes. A lot of times people love to talk about boundaries, but a lot of times we forget that we don't know what boundaries are until we cross them. And then you have to have some sort of like compassion and reconciliation to say, do not cross it again. You know, that's where the harm happens, right? In my opinion. So, you know, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And sometimes you need that oh shit moment to be like, oh, I got some real work to do.
I mean,
you know?
Okay, so last thing I'll add, I'm gonna be hella transparent. I grew up in South Central. So even as we were talking about, Daisy, you mentioned like Latinos being different at the border than Latinos here in LA. Like Latinos in East LA are very different than Latinos in South Central, because in LA, in East LA, you might have like maybe second, third generation Latinos. That's where the Spanglish comes from. That's the essay. You know what I mean? I grew up legit like learning Ebonics first in Spanglish because it was the product that I grew up in. And so, especially with the whole like, you know, blackfishing and black sense and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't think I don't do that, but it's like I grew up in South Central. Like I grew up listening to Biggie and Dr. Dre and Nas at the same time that I was listening to Vicente Fernandez and Juanga. Like I was out here claiming the projects thinking it was some beautiful thing. Like I'm from the jungles, man. You know what's up? And then be like, oh shit, okay, the jungles. You know, I know what it is, you know? And that was in elementary school. All that to say that, I mean, full transparency, like I grew up saying the N-word. You know, I'm not going to shy away from it and lie because it's true. And I think as I got older, I understood more the political implications of that word and realized it wasn't my place to say it in my diaspora, to say it, you know. And so now I hear that, I understand that, but also realize like I know where I come from. And for sure, I grew up saying the N-word with other folks who identify as Latinos and other Black folks, because we grew up, together. And so I think now definitely understand that. But, I only say that to say that it's possible. You just gotta unlearn and just like you said, like live your life. Like there's bigger battles at work. You know what I mean? Like World War III,
and learn that you're actually causing harm. Because that's to what I, especially with all the TikTok warriors or whatever of the kids, like, oh, that they don't speak Spanish, or they've never been to like X country or whatever. And it's like maybe and again, like you said, full transparency. When you're younger, because you only relate things to like your own experience, you're like, I would say like, oh, I wonder why they don't speak Spanish. It would be kind of like, oh, I wonder why they don't want to speak Spanish in that kind of way, because you're like, oh, that's kind of
that's weird.
That's weird that they don't want to. But my experience is so different. And my mom was like, she said to me with words, si no hablas español, no vienes a México. A mí no me vas a dejar en ridículo. My mom's not playing with anything. So I thought that was everyone's experience. But, you don't, as you grow up and you learn, you say like, oh, like people are living paycheck to paycheck. Who's going where? You know what I mean? 100%. What country are they visiting to like, or, some people are growing up in a community and for survival, they need to like fit in and, and adjust and do whatever they need to do. And Spanish or whatever language is not part of that equation,
Assimilation is such a big
Assimilation,
part of it. And the way that, you're talking about like the environment that you grew up in and everything like that. We just recently did a show on Stranger Fruit about whether or not non-Black people of color should say the N-word, why they're saying the N-word. And I told a little bit about my story of like, the N-word is something that I had to learn because I grew up and was raised in Puerto Rico. That is not a word in Puerto Rico. And so when I came to the United States, started learning English, the way that I speak English right now is a product of who taught me to speak English. My parents spoke with an accent. I don't have an accent. So that means I was taught English by predominantly the television, my very white school teachers, and the people that I grew up with. And so I think, the way that some people choose to assimilate and the way that they're taught to assimilate can kind of coincide in a lot of ways. And I think one of the conversations that hopefully we'll have on Stranger Fruit 2 in the future is around Gen Z and the relationship to slang when it really comes from the Black community and how they really just want to keep saying that slang and really adopt it as like a Gen Z thing when it really comes from Black culture. And it's being utilized as like this trendy, cool, like this is how we say things now.
You know who I think are the people to blame the most about that? Gay white men. Gay white men.
Say it though. Say it.
Girl, I think gay white men are like the Karens to like, gay white men is to Karen. No, gay white men is to queer liberation as Karen is to racial liberation.
And feminism.
100%. Like, I always say that I'd rather be the only person of color. I'd rather be the only queer person in a space full of people of color than to be the only person of color in a gay white men's space. Always. Because I'm like, we ain't gonna do that. You know what I mean? And to what you were saying, I love how you expressed that, like that assimilation we choose to do and the forced assimilation. Because similar to you, Daisy, my mom was like, no, baby. Eres el más indio de la casa. You're the brownest of us all. You gonna learn Spanish. And so I was put in a bilingual immersion program. So I learned how to read and write in both English and Spanish at the same time. And, I think a lot of the times, folks, the discourse is like, let's not invalidate people who can't speak Spanish. Like for the, let's not invalidate people's Latinidad for not being able to speak Spanish. I take a lot of pride in being able to speak Spanish very well. Not only like a conversational Spanish, but now an academic Spanish in the sense of like when I go to Mexico, I've also adopted, but that's a whole conversation about like biculturalism.
You're a fresa now.
Vemos. Sí, yo soy la gringa, pero joteo más en chilango. Sí, joteo más en chilango. Like, I've learned to really, like, adopt Mexico City accent, that people who are from Mexico and they hear me speak Spanish, and they're like, ¿eres de la Ciudad de Mexico? And I'm like, pues sí, de ahí de la colonia, you know? And it's cute because I think it just allows me to pass in certain ways, and it helps me because then on top of that, one, being foreign and then being queer, it's like too much. So I'm like, let me just at least pass culturally, and then we can unpack the homophobia together. And it's better to deal with one oppression than twice, 2, 3, 4 at the same time. You're like, oh shit, hold on, you know, agárrame.
Taking me for a ride.
Right. And I think for me, the most important thing and why I say all that is because I grew up in a Salvadorian household. And I think it's because of the machismo that is my father's home country. So he was the one that dictated the cultural upbringing in the house. But my mom still made mole and pozole and like the traditional Mexican dishes for us. So we would also be, you know, Mexican and have that a part of us. And recently, I think I lean more into the Mexican side of me because it's honoring my mother. And you know, we got daddy issues to process anyway. And I'm like, you know, even though I haven't been to El Salvador, right? Like I feel 100% Salvadorian because I grew up in it. I know the fucking Salvadorian national anthem, and I don't know the Mexico one because I was watching.
Mexicanos. No,
Don't start.
Right, empieza la Daisy. A ver, espérame.
Fix the
We all
levels.
gotta do ours.
Yeah, so, you know, it's so complex.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Michelle, I want to hear from you. Like, you're Guatemalan and Jamaican. So, you know, the relationship with anti-Blackness and Latinidad on the Guatemalan side has to be fairly unique because from what I know of Jamaicans, they very much embrace their Blackness and they're very proud of that. But what's it like on the Guatemalan side? Like, what was that like for you growing up?
Oh, it was tough. I mean, as we were starting the conversation, I'm glad that I went last because I had to process some grief. I was like drinking water. Like I wanted to cry. And I was like, whoo.
I feel you.
Well, I grew up in a single parent home. So my primary language was Spanish. And so I got all the stuff from like my mom. I didn't get to experience a Jamaican culture or what it's like to embrace my Blackness because that wasn't a thing. I mean, I didn't grow up, but I didn't get to embrace my Blackness in my family. I experienced racism the moment I came into the world. So that's why it's really hard for me, and I'm gonna probably let myself cry here. Like, it's really tough because the self-hatred that I'm still working through that for myself. Like, I had to recently sit with, oh, wow, I actually still hate being Black.
Wow.
I still hate being Black at the time. Right now, I'm, you know, in a different place. But I had to be with that because I thought that I had worked through that because of how successful I've been. I have a master's degree. I've, you know, started my own business. I'm consider myself, you know, a pretty amazing person in all the ways. And so I thought that I had worked through that. You know, I created a program on changing the way that you relate to yourself to create, you know, a better self and a better world. So, and I hadn't been with the grief or with the pain of what I've experienced growing up in a home that was so dismissive and violent towards Blackness, you know, starting with my mom and noticing like I have a twin brother and he's darker than me. And I learned early on that I was like better off because I wasn't as dark as him. And the violence and the rejection that he experienced from my mom and from my family, you know, it was just very traumatic. So I have a lot of PTSD around Blackness. And so I obsess over Blackness and what it means for me to be Black and what it means for me to have friends. And you know, for a moment I judged that because I was like, everyone has moved on, you know. A lot of people have moved on from that word. And it's like there's an impact there for Black people still. Yeah. I mean, at least for me as a Black person. And that was really, it's hard to see that because I'm like, hey, no, there's still so much impact here that, I'm sorting through, and my brother. And so with all that to say, it's been very violent to be Black and to grow up in a home, with the Maltecos who are also hating of Blackness. And there was always this, my dad's, he's Black, and my mom was just like when my dad left us, like the whole family was like, yeah, because he's Black.
Wow.
Like, there was already like this negative
connotation
and perception of like, yeah, you don't date Black men, and this is what happens when you have babies with a Black man. So it was like we felt like a disgrace, and so even my mom felt like she made a big mistake for falling in love with the Black man. And so there was this constant self-hatred growing up. So I hated being in this body and in this skin, and I found myself trying to fix myself in many ways, like, accepting like that, or trying to be white without knowing it, or being closer to whiteness without knowing it, and noticing that I'm missing out on myself. I'm missing out on the magic that I bring and the medicine that I bring. And so that started very little by little, but recently I had that moment like, fuck, I need to be with this for a moment, because then there is no forward without grieving that.
Yeah.
So for me, I knew I had hit something big. Like, I was excited, and I was sad. Like, I was crying, and I was like, fuck. But I was like, I need this. I need to see this. I need to be with this. And so luckily I have, people that I trust that can hold me in that. And it's like, I had to acknowledge little Michelle, little Black girl Michelle, right? And so my friend, when I told my friend where I was at and the what was coming up for me, they decided to read me a book on Blackness, So it was like this friend, and me, it makes me so emotional because it healed a part of me that I was like, oh my God, they're loving the part of me, the little Black girl in me that I never got that love.
Yeah.
Even though I knew my mom loved me, right? Like, in ways that feel toxic to me, but like, still, like, that's the best way that she knew how to love me. But I felt this healing with my friend. Their name is Rue. And they read this book to me, and they were just like helping me. I mean, I don't know what they were going after this, but in that moment, I just felt so held as little Black Michelle.
Yeah.
And so that's what's been healing, having friends that are willing to be in conversation, that are willing to hear these judgments and these ideas that I have about myself, to be able to like unpack and discern and let go. Whew. So for me, when I talk about these things, I'm just like, there's such a real impact.
Yeah.
There's such a real impact. Like, people leave this earth because of self-hatred and self-abuse. So I'm still unpacking those things in myself,
Yeah. And this is a real impact that our culture and the environments that we're growing up with, whether we are Black or not, is having on people. Yeah. Like, because those of us who are lighter skin, we're constantly told that's better. And so you grow up with the sense of like grandiose about yourself. And those of us who grow up with darker skin are constantly being told that you're less than. And that has its own consequence. That has its own impact on the people who have to just go out and live and exist in a world that's telling them that they're not enough. And these are the types of stories that we need to be talking about to give permission to those little Black girls, Latina girls that are feeling like, well, damn, every time I look at the TV, I don't see myself. And then when I do see myself, I'm the maid. So like, is that all I'm worth?
Or I'm not brilliant, or I don't have, nothing to bring to I'm just bringing my ideas to the table, but there's this fear that I have because it's never been valued, and everyone has an idea how to be in the world, but it doesn't include the Black voice and the even like our pain, right, is constantly dismissed. So it's like I just stay quiet, and I'm just like, okay, move that way. Or go this way, instead of like confronting, because it's so dangerous to confront. And I'm just learning that, and with my friends who don't get it, they don't understand my pain, but a lot of them aren't available they're not emotionally available for the complexity of that conversation. And that there's another sense of abandonment there,
Yeah, because when they're unwilling to confront what that means about them, and how they perpetuate anti-Blackness, that makes people very closed off.
Yes.
And I think that's why I have really tried to bring in non-Black people of color, in particular Latinos, into the conversation about like, you know that anti-Blackness exists, but how do you dismantle it? Because it's not enough to just be like, oh, I don't see race, I'm colorblind. You're not, though, because our culture isn't colorblind.
No.
And you are part of the culture.
Right.
Right? And so it's like you really have to learn how to set your ego aside and start to see like, okay, this is how I perpetuate it. I'll tell you a little story. When I was little, I want to say maybe 4 years old, maybe 5. Mm-hmm. You know, us Latinos have like the longest fucking holiday season on earth. So it was one of the fucking holidays. I don't remember which one, where people, they give you presents. Mm-hmm. And one of my uncles gave me a present, and it was a doll. Mm-hmm. It was a little black doll. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I really wanted this very specific doll who was white. Mm-hmm. And because it wasn't that specific doll, I was like, I don't want it. I don't want it. This is not the doll that I wanted. And if I sit here and unpack it now, I could very easily say, no, it's not because she was a black doll. It was because she was a black doll. Mm-hmm. Because every doll that I had seen previously was white. Didn't look like me either, but it was a white doll. Mm-hmm. And I wanted that doll with the blonde hair, straight, blue eyes, big, huge blue eyes. That's the doll I wanted. Mm-hmm. The black one didn't fit the ideal that I was taught to idolize. And I said no. I rejected the doll at 4 years old. And now, years later, I see that there are actual studies on this, that all kids, no matter their race, will always reject the darker skinned doll and will always go for the lighter skinned doll. No matter what the race is, brown, Black, indigenous, white, they always go for the white doll. Mm-hmm. And I was a living, breathing example of that. Mm-hmm. And so I've really had to unpack, like, what does that mean? Because for me, even growing up Latina, not being white, I still idolize the white Latinos because that's what we're taught. So if we're so unwilling to go there and like go to the darkest places of our culture, we're never going to evolve as a cultura. No. It's never going to happen.
You know what I also think about is like I feel like in the unpacking and dismantling of internalized racism, particularly around anti-Blackness, I still feel missed as a Black person. Like, especially for people who study anti-Blackness and racism, I still feel very missed because sometimes we're so caught up in the idea of dismantling, and then when there's a Black person in front of you where you have opportunities to care, to ask, to be with, to go that extra mile because you value dismantling anti-Blackness, that's not happening.
Right.
And that's my biggest pet peeve where I'm always rolling my eyes.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, you don't even know.
Yeah.
You don't even know. And if I bring a concern to you and you don't have there's often like a lack of capacity and skill to be with it. But still, like, I'm just like, you're talking all these things, but you're still here intellectual. Like,
yes,
you're still haven't gone to you haven't gotten in touch with your body and what it means to care. What does it mean to care? We live in a society where anti-Blackness shows up in violence. So what does it mean to care and to create something different in action, but not like a take action, like really starting with your Black friends.
100.
And if there's some of them that don't know how they're impacted, or some of us are assimilated so much into the white culture, we rather be more white because it's safety for us, right? Like, sometimes there's that. Like, you talk to a Black person, they're like, what? That doesn't exist with me, or they don't.
Right.
They don't experience ownership, or maybe they don't experience racism in ways that we know it exists because of everyone grows up in a different environment. But still, what does it mean to be aware? Yeah. Just aware that when we're in a room, in a conversation, I don't mean fight for me, but it means like, oh, in this room, we're likely to dismiss the Black person in the room. So what does it mean for me to care? Not take action because I want to be right and good, because we also get caught up a lot on being right and being good and being pure. And we use these concepts as distraction and also to to perpetuate that idea of like, you see, I'm good. I'm studying all these things. Yeah. I know about anti-racism and anti-Blackness, but the Black person brings a concern and you're like,
no.
And they're like, girl, I work in diversity.
Yeah. And I'm just like, what? Yeah. And that's what hurts, and where I'm like, I'm done.
Yeah. This is what you just, thank you for sharing that. To me, I think that's what one of my concerns is for Gen Z. I posted a tweet not too long ago that said, never trust somebody who measures their success in social media. Like, the real work happens on the streets.
Yeah.
And I think I'm so grateful for my organizing background because I learned that in that regard, because I think now what's happening is like with social media, we're so caught up in the codependence of technology now that we forgot in the body. And in the body, we have neurons inside of us that are called mirror neurons. And this is a neuron that builds empathy. And you'll first learn that through caretakers. But the more you disconnect from the body, remember, neurons have elasticity. So if you're not working that synapse, it's gone. So now with this constant thing of artificial intelligence, it's like, girl, you can't compute empathy. You have to live empathy. Empathy is not a skill you learn, it's a skill you live. And so I that's my constant fear of like how people are relating in that regard. And I think especially with this constant I want to say pornography of Black trauma, really. It becomes so scripted in our bodies that you become indifferent to it. And that's the problem. The indifference. Sorry, I got hella. The indifference about it. You know,
so when it's in your face, just like you're saying, when it's in your face and a Black woman or a Black man is telling you what you just said hurt me, or what you just did is anti-Black, people are like, oh no. Not me, not me.
Or you're just a victim.
You're
used to being a victim.
They put it back on you.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying. You're saying the intellectualizing of the fact that anti-Blackness is a thing that exists in the world is just a little bit of a scratch of the surface of the actual impact and the reality that we are living in.
Yeah, because I always go back to like, I'm not just a story.
Yeah.
I'm not just an idea.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, it had like, I'm so over like being in conversation without the realness of what happens. Even with me, right? Even for me as a Black woman, one of the things that I've done extra for myself is be able to have the capacity. I've worked with, I've been in leadership programs where I can build that capacity to be with that difference of someone being like, you know, and that's been hard for me because I'm usually like, you know, like I'm just like very emotional. I'm triggered. I feel like someone's about to hurt me because I grew up, you know, being attacked and targeted for being Black in the projects. And so all of these things I carry inside my body. But for me, I feel like I want to be able to be with when it's worth it for me. When it's like family or when it's like friends, and if they're showing up a certain way, I want to be able to have the skill and the capacity to hold what's happening in the room. And you know, I want that. I want my friends to want that also for me, with me. You know, like I don't want to be the only. And I'm like, gosh. Like I have to, even in doing that, I have to not blame myself for the ways that people react.
Absolutely.
Latina is such a Latin American term that it was created in Latin America. Latinx comes from the academy, comes from the academia. But like, how do you pronounce it? Like, are we gonna just pronounce this in Spanish and English and Spanglish?
Right.
Like, and there's no consistency around that either. So it's just so much like those aren't the real battles. Like to me, like I need you to take this energy around Latinx and remorphose it and put it towards the U.S. imperialist system that caused a lot of the immigration of a lot of our diasporas.